In this chapter, we're going to look at values, ethical principles, and you. I'm going to start this discussion with a question, and that question is, what is an ethical dilemma? I'm sorry that my email popped up there. We'll just get rid of that real quickly. So what is an ethical dilemma? Well, it involves making choices based on values. For example, let's say you're taking a test and you're left in a classroom on your honor. You know that cheating is wrong, and you understand that it's a violation of the school's academic integrity policy. The teacher leaves the room and your best friend asks you for the answer. What do? That's an ethical dilemma. What is more important to you, your honor or your loyalty to your friend? In this situation, you're forced to decide. And in this situation, you're in an area of conflicting values. This is something we describe as tension between social and moral values. Now, you have to remember that a value is something that you think is worthwhile. Values are relative. In other words, they differ from person to person. And you have to remember that there are non-moral values and there are moral values, and those are two very different things. But the key here is that the decision to choose non-moral values over moral values defines your character. And how is it that you want your character to be defined? And I think sometimes we have to think about that. Let's just say, for example, you've coached at a school for 5 years, and so you've worked with kids from their 8th grade year through their senior year. And now you leave and you go on to a different school. But you've touched the lives of all these different players. How do you want them to remember you? What are some words that you would want to come to mind to those people when they thought of you? Would you want integrity to come to mind? Would you want honesty to come to mind? Excuse me again, my email is going a little crazy here. Would you want honesty to come to mind? Or perhaps would you want winning at all costs? Not caring about the players, caring about winning more than players? Playing favorites? So how do you want to be remembered? When we talk about the perception of sport, we get into a situation where we have the ideal world and we have the real world. And in the real world, it's basically, how do people tend to see sport? Or in the ideal world, how do people tend to see sport? In the real world is, how is sport really? And so we look at this term, what is good? And the term good is a very tricky word. For example, we can say that John is a good basketball player, and basically that describes a non-moral value. Or we can say that John is a good person, and in that context, we're describing a moral value. Now let's say that we admire the traits that made John a good basketball player. He worked hard, he played with intensity, he was a team player, etc. But in essence, John could be a good basketball player, but essentially an immoral person. So we have to remember that a good person is totally different. Now, when we look at this chart, it draws out the perception of sport. You can see that problems can exist when we can't see the forest for the trees, or in other words, we miss what our real mission is as a coach. The first part of this table describes motives. The second, intention, and the third, action. Can you think of any time in your athletic career when bad triumphed over good? It happens, and it's going to be one of the biggest challenges you will face as a coach. This is what I think is one of the biggest reasons why we need a working philosophy, a roadmap that describes our values, our principles, etc. Too often we look at philosophies as X's and O's. I mean, when's the last time you had to write a coaching philosophy? And we spent all that time talking about what type of offense, what type of defense. And I'll tell you right now, as a person who coached for 23 years, you're going to win a lot more games on your your personal philosophy than you are on your strategic philosophy. Because kids play for people. They don't play for strategy. When the X's and O's become our only philosophy, we lose. We have to build our programs on something much deeper than strategy. And on this, I can speak from experience. Your philosophy must be built upon your values. So how do you construct this roadmap? Well, first of all, record your values. The rule of thumb is more than 1 and less than 5. And next, you construct your principles. So we look at here. Values are the building blocks of principles. And principles show how the values are related to each other. The example here are value, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The principle, human beings have the inherent right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. They have an inherent right. Well, this comes right from the pen of Thomas Jefferson and the Declaration of Independence. That document was built on values that were turned into principles of a society. So how do we construct a principle? Well, they're guides that tell us what kinds of actions are acceptable in our dealings with other people. Basically said, when we live by our values in our everyday actions towards others, we are demonstrating our principles. So the first step is you have to record a value in the left column. In the second step, you need to write the negative in principle form. So we talk about questioning a principle. Are there times when lying is acceptable? Are there not times when lying is acceptable? When can you imagine that it is acceptable to lie? Think about that a little bit. Write down some reasons why you think it's okay to lie. To save lives, lying is acceptable. This is an extreme case, and it doesn't occur often in life, but it is acceptable. What exceptions would you make to your moral principles? This is a very tough exercise. And in this case, I want you to expand your table to include when you might go against your moral principle. And here we get that exception. In these situations or in these exceptions, they're serious and they should not be written for everyday situations. So, in conclusion, short discussion here, but perhaps one of the most difficult things you'll do in this class. And we'll talk about that in the next slide. But this is difficult because this discussion exposes you to one of the most difficult things we have to do in our life, and that is to define who we are. Think about that a little bit. Who are you? If you had to write down three words right now that describe you, take that piece of paper and pencil and write it down. And I bet you're sitting there right now with your pen on the pencil because maybe you're thinking about what you should be saying or what you want people to think about yourself. But really, who are you? For the most part, when we think about the values that are supported universally, well, there's 4 of them that are supported universally in sport. And they're honesty, justice, responsibility, and beneficence, which means to do no harm. Beneficence, to do no harm. Think about how many times as a coach you have the chance to actually do harm. To do harm to somebody physically when you perhaps ignore an injury, or perhaps when the kid comes out of the game with what you're going to describe as just getting his bell rung, and we know now that nobody just gets their bell rung. And the kid says he feels fine, you send him back because it's win at all costs for you. Or to that athlete that isn't the best player on your team that you just don't give any attention to. What do you do to their psyche? We have a chance in sport to do a lot of harm, but we also have the opportunity to do a lot of good. But it really is going to depend on who we are and who we choose to be. So in this assignment, the value assignment is described in the lecture, and we're asking you to do values, principles, and exceptions. This isn't going to take you 5 minutes. It sounds like an easy assignment. It's not going to just take you 5 minutes. It's going to take you a little bit of time. And so really think back, maybe listen to the lecture again, and think about who you are, who you want to be, and how far you're willing to go. And make sure you participate in the discussion thread.